Imagine waking up to see your house engulfed in flames, only to realize your own HOA president lit the match. Stay with me till the end. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of shocking justice. The air was thick with smoke, and the sound of wood snapping under pressure filled the night. Marcus stood barefoot on the driveway, staring at the inferno that used to be his home. His chest tightened with each breath, the acrid stench clawing his throat. Flames licked upward, swallowing the roof, until it caved in with a thunderous crash. His neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering, pointing, some gasping in shock. Others looked away, uneasy, unwilling to be part of what they already suspected. His lips trembled as he whispered to himself, this was no accident. She did this. Only hours earlier, life had been quiet, almost hopeful. Marcus had moved into the neighborhood just months before. A simple 2-story house with a trim lawn and a porch swing had felt like a dream come true. He had worked for years to afford it, saving every cent from his job as an electrician. Now he wanted stability and a place where he could belong, yet from the very first day, he sensed a storm waiting to break. She introduced herself as Kerren, the president of the Homeowners Association. A thin smile stretched across her face when they first met, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She asked him where he worked, how long he planned to stay, and if he was sure he could keep up with HOA standards. Her words were polite, but her tone dripped with suspicion. The air around her seemed to carry an invisible line, you are not one of us. At first, Marcus brushed it off. He kept his yard tidy, his fence painted, his trash bins in order. He waved at neighbors and greeted them with warmth. Some responded, others kept their distance. Kerren never smiled back. Instead, she stood across the street, clipboard in hand, jotting notes whenever she walked past his house. He ignored her scribbles until the letters began. The first envelope was taped to his door, HOA violation for mailbox not aligned with regulation color. He checked the rule book. It was beige like every other mailbox. The second envelope warned him about lawn height. Though he had mowed it just 2 days before, then came one about too many guests after his sister visited with her children. The words were typed neat and cold, but the message was louder than ink. People like you do not belong here. Marcus tried to reason with her. He caught her near her rose bushes one evening and said calmly, Kerren, I am following the rules. The lawn is fine. The mailbox matches everyone else. She adjusted her sunglasses, so the sun had long dipped below the horizon, and said, rules are rules. If you cannot handle them, maybe this is not the neighborhood for you. Her smile never reached her eyes. He returned home that night, pacing the living room, his fists clenched and unclenched. He was not a man quick to anger, but the weight of injustice pressed on him. He thought of his late mother, reminding him to fight smart, not loud. He whispered, I will not let her push me out. This is my home. The weeks dragged on with new complaints, each more absurd than the last. One morning, he found Kerren crouched near his fence, taking pictures. He stepped outside and asked, what are you doing? She straightened, brushing dirt from her knees. Oh, just documenting HOA matters. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Documentation for what you will see, she replied, and walked away, heels tapping like a gavel, sealing a judgment. Word spread fast among neighbors, rumors that Marcus played loud music at night, rumors that his visitors blocked driveways, rumors that he was behind on HOA dues, though every receipt proved otherwise. At the grocery store, he caught whispers cutting off mid-sentence. When he walked by, he recognized the source. He saw Kerren chatting with Mrs. Elkins, the gossip queen of the street, both of them glancing at him with smirks thin as blades. One evening, Marcus returned home to find a bright orange slip stuck to his front door, warning of escalating fines and threat of legal action. His chest ached as he read line after line of fabricated violations. He clenched the paper in his hand and looked across the street. Kerren stood there, arms crossed, chin lifted, watching. She called out loud enough for passing neighbors to hear. Maybe you should think about living somewhere more suitable. He shouted back, I am not going anywhere. Kerren, not now, not ever. Her smile sharpened as if she enjoyed his defiance. That night, he sat alone in the dark on his porch. The cicadas hummed in the silence. The stars blinked indifferently above. He thought about every insult, every whispered rumor, every false complaint. His pulse slowed as determination replaced despair. He realized this was not just about fines or HOA rules. This was about erasing him, making him feel small, making him disappear. He whispered to the night, she picked the wrong man. The following morning, he woke with the uneasy sense that things were only beginning to escalate. He spotted Kerren again, clipboard in hand, eyes fixed on his home. Her presence was a shadow that never left. He knew she would not stop, not until she broke him. Marcus inhaled deeply, steadying himself. He had faced storms before. He had built his life from nothing, brick by brick, wire by wire, and he would not let a woman with a pen and a smile tear it down. But even as he resolved to fight back, a chill ran down his spine. Something darker glimmered in her eyes, something that told him this was only the beginning. The first section ends with Marcus clutching the orange slip in his hand, his eyes blazing with quiet fury. Kerren across the street, smirking, her silhouette framed by the last rays of sunset. The air between them heavy with unspoken war. The battle lines were drawn, and neither would back down. The weeks following the orange slip unfolded like a slow tightening noose. Each morning Marcus opened his door bracing for another envelope, another accusation, another strike against his existence. Kerren had found new ways to escalate her war. Anonymous letters appeared in his mailbox, written in block letters, with phrases like "leave before it gets worse," and "you are not welcome here." The ink smelled fresh, as though whoever had written them wanted the scent to cling to his fingers like a taunt. He read them in silence, jaw clenched, pulse hammering, but he never tore them up. Instead, he stacked them neatly in a drawer, each one a silent witness to the growing storm. When he reported the harassment to the HOA board, his complaint was dismissed. Kerren sat at the head of the table during the meeting, tapping her pen against the polish, which she leaned forward and said smoothly, "Marcus, we have reviewed the matter, but found no evidence of wrongdoing. Maybe you are overreacting. Perhaps this neighborhood simply is not the right fit for you." The board members nodded, sheepishly unwilling to oppose their queen. Marcus stood, their fists planted on the table, biting back, the fury burning in his chest. He realized then that he was not only fighting Kerren, but an entire system built to shield her. The harassment soon became physical. He awoke one morning to find his car tires slashed, deep gouges running across the rubber. The metal rims gleamed mockingly in the dawn light. His stomach twisted. As he bent to examine the damage, the knife marks still fresh, he heard a window slide open across the street. Kerren's blinds tilted just enough to reveal the faintest outline of her face. She did not wave, she did not smile, but Marcus knew she was watching, savoring his rage. Days later, graffiti appeared on his wooden fence, large crude letters painted in red, spelling "get out." The paint dripped like blood trailing downward. Marcus scrubbed until his arms ached, but the stain refused to vanish. The words echoed in his mind long after the fence was clean. He reported it to the police, but without proof. They shrugged and left. Kerren approached later that evening with a false look of concern on her face. She clutched her pearls and said, "Oh, Marcus, such a shame about the vandalism. We must have troublemakers in the area. You should be more careful." He met her eyes and replied low and steady, "I know who it was." She tilted her head with mock innocence and whispered, "Prove it." Her arrogance cut deeper than the threats. Each smirk, each calculated remark was designed to remind him of his powerlessness. Yet Marcus refused to crumble. He spent long nights pacing his living room, rehearsing responses to her cruelty. His reflection in the darkened window grew harder, sharper. The man staring back at him was not beaten, he was preparing. The breaking point arrived on a humid summer night. Marcus stirred awake to the faint smell of gasoline seeping through his window. His heart kicked into overdrive. He leapt from bed, racing to the front door, and flung it open. The night was still except for the faint glug of liquid hitting concrete. His eyes darted to the shadows, and there was a dark figure crouched near his porch. A red gas can tilted in their hand. The spark of a lighter flickered briefly before the figure jerked upright and bolted into the night. Marcus shouted, his throat raw, as flames roared to life on the edge of his house. The fire moved, fast, leaping from wood to curtains, swallowing everything in its path. He dialed 911, voice trembling. As he screamed, his address flames clawed at the window's heat, blasting his skin, as he tried desperately to salvage what little he could, but smoke filled the rooms, choking him back in the yard, where he felt his knees, watching helplessly. The sirens came late, too late. His house cracked, and collapsing on itself, a hollow skeleton, consumed by fire. By morning, the air reeked of charred timber, and as the neighbors gathered again, whispering behind cupped hands, some stared at him with pity, others with suspicion. Kerren stood among them in a pressed white blouse, her hair immaculate, untouched by the chaos. She raised her voice loud enough for all to hear. Such a terrible tragedy. Perhaps if Marcus had followed the HOA rules, this could have been prevented. A few neighbors frowned, but none spoke against her. The words lodged in Marcus's chest like a blade, twisting with every breath. He wandered to blackened remains of his home, ashes crunching underfoot. A childhood photo, half burned, lay curled in the debris. He picked up, holding it with trembling hands. His throat tightened. But behind the grief, another fire burned, one no water could quench. Kerren thought she had destroyed him. She thought the flames had silenced him. But as he stared at the ruins, Marcus whispered to himself, "No, this is not the end, this is the beginning." Later that afternoon, he found something by the edge of the yard, hidden beneath soot and melted grass. Of red gas, indented and scorched, but intact. His pulse quickened as he lifted it. The smell of fuel still pungent on the plastic. His eyes narrowed as he noticed faint smudges across the handle, fingerprints. He held it firmly in his grip, a grim smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. Finally, the first thread of proof. The house was gone, but the war was not over. It was only about to shift. Marcus raised his eyes across the street. Kerren stood on her porch sipping lemonade, watching the wreckage. As though it were entertainment, he did not look away. He let her see the determination. In his eyes, the air between them hummed with unspoken promises. She thought she had won. She thought the fire had ended him. But Marcus knew better. This was no defeat. It was a fuel for his revenge. And when it came, would burn far brighter than any fire she had ever set. Marcus no longer carried himself like a man beaten by disaster. He walked to the neighborhood with shoulders squared and eyes unflinching. The ashes of his home clung to his memory. But instead of breaking him, they tempered him into steel. The red gas sat hidden in his garage, the fingerprints waiting like a loaded weapon. He understood now that brute force would not topple Kerren. Her power thrived on manipulation, whispers, and the illusion of control. To defeat her, he needed more than anger. He needed strategy. He began quietly collecting every shred of her cruelty. The drawer that once held letters of hate grew thicker with evidence. He bought a small camera and placed it in the branches of his oak tree, angled toward the street at night. He sat watching the grainy footage on his laptop. Every flick of her pen on the clipboard, every time she lingered at his property, was captured piece by piece, each recording carved away her mask. A close friend named Daniel, a young attorney who had grown up with Marcus, visited after the fire. They stood by the blackened remains of the house. Daniel said, "You cannot fight her. With rage, you have to outsmart her, build a case strong enough to crush her pride." Marcus nodded silently, his jaw set. He was tired of silence, tired of retreat this time. He would not only fight back, he would expose her. The first strike came to the digital world. Marcus uploaded short clips on social media of Kerren marching across his lawn, clipboard in hand. His captions were sharp and concise. Stories of harassment, whispered through text threads, blossomed into viral outrage. Soon the hashtag #Kerren began trending. Videos spread like wildfire. Strangers across the country shaking their heads in disbelief at the audacity of a suburban tyrant. Marcus watched as likes climbed and comments flooded in each one, a small stone in the avalanche forming against her. Kerren dismissed it all. When she saw Marcus outside, she called across the street with a laugh, "Enjoy your 15 minutes of fame. The internet forgets quickly." Marcus smiled, faintly replying, "Maybe," but it never forgets forever. Her confidence was her weakness. She believed no one could touch her because she sat atop the throne of the HOA. But cracks began to show. Some neighbors who once avoided Marcus approached him quietly, whispering their own stories of Kerren's cruelty. An elderly couple recounted how she fined them for leaving holiday lights up a day too long. A single mother revealed Kerren threatened to tow her car for being parked slightly outside the line. Marcus listened, carefully gathering their words. Their testimonies were seeds of truth that would soon bloom into undeniable evidence. At night, Marcus worked with Daniel, drafting a plan. They mapped out Kerren's violations, her threats, her pattern of intimidation. The goal was not only to win justice, but to strip away the power she flaunted so arrogantly. Marcus envisioned it like setting a trap. Every step Kerren took would lead her closer to her downfall. The more viral his post became, the more reckless Kerren grew. She stormed his yard one afternoon, waving a letter, shouting, "You will regret this, Marcus. Everyone here is sick of you. I will bury you in lawsuits." He simply raised his phone, filming her tirade. Her shrill words cut through the summer air, and every second was captured. Her face, twisted in fury, was the perfect portrait of entitlement. He knew it would be gold for the growing audience online. Her threats escalated into arrogance. She boasted at a neighborhood gathering that Marcus was nothing but a troublemaker desperate for attention. She said loudly, "He has no proof, nothing but lies and dramatics." A few neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they had seen enough with their own eyes. Kerren mistook their silence for loyalty, but silence was only the calm before betrayal. Marcus announced an emergency HOA meeting. His tone measured, his eyes unwavering. He invited the entire neighborhood, promising he had something important to share. Rumors spread quickly, and curiosity sparked the night. Before the meeting, Kerren stopped him in the street, her arms folded, lips curved into a smug grin. She said, "Tomorrow this ends. Enjoy your little stunt, because when I am done, no one will believe you." Marcus looked at her calmly and replied, "Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you." He walked away, leaving her standing in the glow of the street lamp, her smirk faltering just slightly. For the first time, she sensed that maybe her control was slipping. Marcus could feel it too. The tide had turned the fire that destroyed his house, had ignited something far stronger than flames. It had lit the path to her downfall. That night, as Marcus prepared his evidence, laying out the gas and the footage, the letters, and the testimonies, he felt a calm he had not known in months. The grief of his lost home still lingered, but it no longer weighed him down. It fueled him. Tomorrow the mask would fall. Tomorrow the truth would burn brighter than any fire Kerren had ever lit. And when it did, the entire neighborhood would see her for who she truly was. The community hall buzzed with restless energy as neighbors filled every seat and stood pressed against the walls. The air was thick with anticipation, voices low and tense. Kerren entered like a queen, striding into her quarter heels, clicked across the linoleum, her chin high, her lips curled in a smirk. She wore a pristine white blouse and a string of pearls as though dressing for victory. She spotted Marcus near the front comm and steady with Daniel at his side. She laughed lightly, shaking her head, and muttered pathetic. Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the room. He stood tall, though the memory of his burned-home post, like a wound in his chest tonight, was not about ashes, it was about truth. He looked around at the faces of neighbors, some skeptical, some hopeful, some fearful. They deserved to know the monster who had ruled them with intimidation. The meeting began with Kerren clearing her throat and addressing the room. "Thank you all for coming. I know there has been noise online and wild accusations, but let us remember the rules of this community matter. Most we cannot allow lies and theatrics to divide us." Her tone was sharp, polished, rehearsed. She believed this was her stage. Marcus let her speak. He wanted her arrogance to shine before the fall. When she finished, he rose, holding a small folder in his hand. His voice was steady, yet carried the weight of fire. He said, "I did not call this meeting to argue about rules. I called it because the truth has been buried under fear for too long." The room quieted, a ripple of unease moving through the crowd. Kerren rolled her eyes, but Marcus continued. He opened the folder and pulled out the first letter of the block, handwriting glaring from the page. He read aloud, "Leave before it gets worse. You are not welcome here." He held it high for all to see. This was taped to my door. He laid down photo after photo, envelope after envelope, each piece of harassment stacked like stones in a wall. Kerren waved her hand dismissively and said, "Anyone can type a letter that proves nothing," but her voice wavered slightly. Marcus did not stop. He played a clip from his camera, showing her trespassing near his fence, clipboard clutched in her hand. "Pause and take pictures." Gasps erupted in the room. Kerren's face reddened. She barked out, "I was documenting violations. It is my duty as president." Then Marcus placed a red gasket on the table. The smell of fuel, faint but unmistakable. A murmur spread across the room. He said, "This was found in my yard after the fire, and it carries fingerprints." He paused, letting the words sink in. Kerren shifted uncomfortably, her smirk faltering. She stood and shouted, "This is ridiculous. Anyone could have left that there." But Marcus raised a hand and said, "Not anyone." And then the screen lit with the final piece. A neighbor had provided footage in their doorbell camera. The grainy video showed a woman in the dead of night, crouched near Marcus's porch, the shape of her hair, the tilt of her shoulders, unmistakable. Even in the poor light, the outline was hers. She lifted a gas and tilted it, poured, and then the glow of fire burst into life. The crowd erupted in shocked gasps, filling the room. A reporter scribbled furiously. Police officers stationed at the back moved forward. Kerren's mask shattered. She screamed, "This is fake. You are all blind. He is manipulating you." She looked around, desperate, searching for allies, but saw only cold stares of the same neighbors she had bullied. Now saw her truth. She turned to Marcus with venom in her eyes. "Spitting, you ruined me." Marcus stepped closer, his voice low, yet carrying through the silence. "No, Kerren, you did this to yourself." The officers placed cuffs on her wrists as she thrashed and cursed. She shrieked, "You will regret this. I built this neighborhood. I made the rules." Marcus stared at her, his eyes unwavering, and replied, "And now you will face them." The hall buzzed louder than before, but now the whispers carried triumph rather than fear. Some neighbors clapped softly, others shook Marcus's hand. Daniel smiled with relief. The reporters captured every moment. Cameras flashing. Kerren's fall was no longer private. It was broadcast for the world to witness. As the police led her out, she twisted one last time toward Marcus, her face a mask of fury and despair, but the sound of neighbors cheering drowned out her voice. For the first time since moving in, Marcus felt the weight lift from his chest. The ashes of his house remained, but the chains of oppression had been broken. Later that night, he stood before the charred remains of his home. The moon cast a pale glow over the ruins. The scent of smoke still lingered, but so did the echo of voices that had stood with him. He clutched the gas can one final time, then set it down gently on the rubble, a symbol of her hatred, now turned into the proof of her downfall. He whispered at night, "She thought fire would destroy me, but all she did was spark something bigger." He turned away, shoulders straight, eyes forward, ready to rebuild. Stronger than before, behind him a ruin smoldered softly, not with despair, but with the promise of new beginning. The war was over, and Marcus had won.